Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. My book, Cassandra Killjoy Paranormal Private Eye, The Search for the Swordsman, is available on Amazon.com. You can buy your copy right now by following the link in the description box. And for more information, feel free to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Enjoy the video. In the early 1800s, the West was wild and lawless, and yet the early settlers pressed on and survived, in spite of the fact that the corrupt men that were in charge bent the law to their advantage and oppressed them. But when justice is outlawed, the just must become outlaws. Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. I'm Erod and I'm the Blockbuster Buster. Now, for those of you who don't know, created by Johnston McCulley in 1919, Zorro is one of the first multimedia characters in American history, being adapted into every existing medium in the entertainment world. In the 80s, the advent of cable television brought us over 100 channels to enjoy other than the 3 networks. The Family Channel promised family-friendly entertainment 24 hours a day, and their primetime lineup was the key to secure a faithful audience. This primetime lineup would be led by 2 shows starring 2 legends, Rin Tin Tin, K-9 Cop, and Zorro. The plot. The show takes place in Los Angeles, California, in the 1830s. The settlers and natives are heavily oppressed, and the corrupt reign high. All the while, the son of a wealthy landowner, Diego de la Vega, returns from Madrid, Spain, only to discover that his birthplace has become a land of crime and injustice. So Diego decides to employ all the skills that he acquired throughout his years spent studying in Madrid to fight injustice and protect the people of Los Angeles as the clever fox, Zorro. Cast and characters. First things first, the show had an incredible list of guest stars, which is especially impressive when you stop to consider that the show was filmed in Spain, and each guest star had to be flown over, which led to the show including iconic performers like Hunter Tylo, Doug McClure, Warwick Davis, Philip Michael Thomas, Jesse Ventura, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Andrew the Giant, and Batman himself, Adam West.
A secret cave, how splendid!
Now let's start talking about the central cast, starting with our main villain, Alcalde Luis Ramon, played by Michael Tylo. Yes, Quint Chamberlain from Guiding Light. Soap opera superstar Michael Tylo played the main villain in this show. Luis Ramon is the mayor of Los Angeles. He comes from wealth and privilege and received his position via nepotism, as opposed to hard work. The man has no understanding of mercy or compassion, but is very well acquainted with the concept of self-preservation.
From this moment on, I own your evil heart, and I will crush it if you hurt this pueblo anymore.
Sergeant Jaime Mendoza, played by James Victor. He is the bumbling henchman of Mayor Ramon, but just because he is in the employ of a villain doesn't actually mean that he's evil. He is the most kind-hearted, well-intended individual in the series, who's just misled by an ignorant and tyrannical boss, and a burning desire for food.
Well, then your duty, Sergeant, is to your supper.
Don Alejandro de la Vega, played by Efren Zimbalist Jr. Alejandro is Diego's father, who somehow miraculously remains unaware that Zorro is his own son. Which begs the question, why doesn't Diego just tell him that he is Zorro? Alejandro is a courageous man with a strong sense of justice, who would most definitely support his son's activities as a vigilante. But Diego insists in keeping him in the dark.
Victoria needs our help.
You're right. Take a basket of food to the jail for her.
And that's all?
Victoria Escalante, played by Patrice Martinez. She is your standard love interest and damsel in distress. Personally, I appreciate the creators making her a capable woman of the Wild West. She's a self-reliant business owner and a survivor who just so happens to have a knack for getting into ridiculously dangerous situations from which she must be saved. Seriously, she gets into danger so often that it's inadvertently hilarious.
Zorro is not going to appear unless we have the proper bait.
Bait.
And I doubt very much if you will fall for us arresting Senorita Escalante again.
I do wish the writers would have evolved her further than just being the damsel who is always pining over our favorite masked vigilante. But Patrice is so charming and delightful that it's difficult to complain.
You all right? Do I look all right? Senorita, please.
Felipe, played by Juan Diego Botto. Felipe is Zorro's trusty assistant and confidant, the only one who knows the Fox's true identity. Now, in past adaptations, Zorro's assistant is generally an older man, who doesn't just provide aid, but sage-like advice. By making Felipe younger, it completely changed the dynamic of the character's relationship, as now he is both Alfred and Robin in one. And it's more of Diego's apprentice, his protege, one that could potentially take up the mask of Zorro one day. But the most impressive part of Juan Diego Botto's performance as Felipe is, the character is mute. So the entire performance is physical, and he performs it so well that after a while you forget that the character can't speak.
Felipe, look at me. You can hear, can't you? Oh, that's wonderful.
Don Diego de la Vega, aka Zorro, played by Duncan Regehr. Fun fact, Duncan is an Olympic-level fencer and equestrian, so a lot of the cool stuff that you see Zorro doing in the show was actually performed by Duncan himself. Not to take anything away from the incredible stunt doubles who worked on the series. Diego is a learned man, with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, and while he might have an aptitude for fighting, more often than not, he relies on science and ingenuity to get the job done.
Trying to warn you, Alcalde. Zorro's thinking with the cannon.
Seasons 1 and 2.
This particular version of Zorro was episodic, meaning that the series was made up of lots of standalone episodes, as opposed to having seasonal arcs, because having seasonal arcs was not very common at the time. Now let's talk about some notable episodes. The legend begins. Smack dab in the middle of the season, we have this epic 4-part episode in which our hero takes a bad fall and ends up terribly injured at the bottom of a cliff, with the mayor's lancers closing in on him. While trapped, Diego reminisces about the series of events that led him to become Zorro. So we get to see our hero's origin story, bookended by an exciting series of cliffhangers, sometimes literally. After season 1, Efrain Zimbalist Jr. didn't want to commit to spending 100 days out of the year in Spain, so sadly he dropped out of the series. Which actually ended up being very fortunate, as his career would go on to find new life doing voiceover for animated productions. Most notably, he would go on to voice Alfred in Batman the Animated Series and Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man on Fox Kids. Yes, both characters were voiced by the same man, so when I tell you that he's a legend, I mean it. Over in Spain, Henry Darrow would take over playing Alejandro. Interestingly enough, he didn't play the character the same way. While Efrain Zimbalist Jr. portrayed Alejandro as a refined, dashing, classy gentleman, Darrow's version was a proud soldier and a rancher who earned everything that he had, and is not afraid to put in a hard day's work. Both were great, just different. One for All, probably the most famous two-parter in the entire series, which sees Zorro cross over with the Three Musketeers. Now some of you might want to cry foul, as the Musketeers are from the 17th century and Zorro is from the 19th. Well, it's not actually the Three Musketeers, it's their descendants. More specifically, the descendants of Athos, Porthos, and D'Artagnan. I guess Aramis remained pious and didn't have any children. Unfortunately, the Musketeers' descendants are a bunch of amateurs who have no business wearing the Musketeer uniforms, and Zorro ends up doing most of the work. The novelty of the crossover wears off pretty quick.
If you did find out the name of his tailor.
And you never will, monsieur.
And thus we arrive at the epic Season 2 finale, The Devil's Fortress. A group of soldiers that includes Victoria's father are wrongfully incarcerated in the Devil's Fortress, which is an inescapable prison created for the worst criminals in the region. Mayor Ramon, being the highest authority in the area, is asked to make a plea on their behalf. But as per usual, he has more selfish goals in mind. So both Victoria and Diego race to the fortress to save the soldiers and stop Ramon from gaining more power. This episode is beyond epic, featuring some of the most awesome moments in the entire series. Not to mention the most shocking climax the show ever had.
Vega. No! I should have known!
Seasons 3 and 4.
So now that Ramon is unavailable, Los Angeles is left without a mayor. But instead of running a fair, free election, the Spanish crown assigns a new man in charge. Enter Ignacio de Soto, played by J.G. Hertzler. While Ramon was a pompous peacock, de Soto is a ruthless, vindictive soldier who would be a more formidable foe for Zorro for the first few episodes of the season. As halfway through season 3, de Soto becomes the same oblivious buffoon as Ramon, and everything goes back to the status quo. Which is a shame, because Hertzler did such a fantastic job of building up de Soto as this imposing, intimidating figure. But alas, the creative team reverted back to what they felt worked best.
Oh, I was vigilant enough to remove the ammunition before you arrived.
Alright, it's time to talk about the most notorious episode in the series, Turning the Tables, which sees a bigoted Spanish emissary visiting California, who has a strong vendetta against the indigenous people in the area. So Diego teaches him a lesson by giving him a potion that changes the color of his skin and hair to make him look like an indigenous person. And then he lets him suffer the same indignities he put others through. Now, I can see how the creators had the best of intentions here. And I can see how this plot would have worked if the emissary's transformation would have occurred by accident. But the fact that Diego is solely responsible is just a huge misstep. To put it plainly, you can't fight racism with more racism.
No, senor. I have rescued 2 men. Indian or Spanish, it matters not to me. And as for my reward, all I ask is that in future, you treat all men with the dignity they deserve.
Now let's talk about the first, only, and final arc of the series. The creative team decided to close out the series with an epic multi-episode arc that sees a powerful Spanish emissary named Don Gilberto Rosendo take over Los Angeles and make Ramon and de Soto's tenure as mayor look like a walk in the park, as the man is malevolent and cruel.
Stay away from him! He's mine. Senor, I'm flattered.
Fun fact, Rosendo's bodyguard throughout the arc is played by none other than James Bond himself, Daniel Craig. Yup, Bond playing a henchman.
Lieutenant Hidalgo has killed over 100 Frenchmen in battle. Too bad for him. I'm not French.
So Rosendo's cruelty starts to infect Los Angeles and our heroes band together to stop him. But there's a twist. The reason Rosendo is stirring up chaos in Los Angeles and making things particularly difficult for the De La Vegas is because he is Don Alejandro's secret illegitimate son and wants revenge on the old rancher for allegedly abandoning him and his mother. Oh, and if that's not twisty enough for you, Rosendo knows that Diego is Zorro and is threatening to expose his secret. Suffice it to say, this was a worthy end to this wonderful series.
I left Zorro under a pile of rocks in Diablo Canyon, and now you stink of cordite from the explosion. Zorro and Diego are one and the same, aren't they? The enigma's solved. The secret is out!
Final verdict.
The 90s was an era of anti-heroes. A time when hyper-violent characters like Spawn, Lobo, and Deadpool were rising in popularity. But for 4 epic years, this show celebrated honorable romantic heroes who fought for truth and justice, who took a stand for those who couldn't stand on their own, and defeated the villains without the need to behave like them. Because even the most powerful adversary cannot outwit a fox. 10 points in the badassitude meter. Practice your fencing, grab yourself some tamales, and give it a watch. Until next time, I'm Erod, and I'm the Blockbuster Buster.